Good evening, everyone, and welcome to another map show. As usual, on a Wednesday evening at this time, we have what we call our map show, and there's a motivational talk and a panel that follows. And tonight, I'm excited to introduce to somebody who really, from a Map for Life perspective, requires no introduction. He's Mr. Glen McQuirk, the founder of Map for Life. Glen is passionate about what he does. He's passionate about purpose, about helping others find their purpose, and about mapping the world. In fact, that's what he's all passionate about. So tonight, I'm really looking forward to what he has to share with us. I'm looking forward then to discussing it with the panel later on. So without much more of ado, I hand you over to Glen, who'll be talking on 2 realms, 2 worlds. Over.
Well, good evening. This is really an exciting time, and I trust that each of you who is joining us from wherever you might be will share your comments online so that we can interact with you. And I certainly look forward to sharing tonight's message titled 2 Realms, Worlds Apart. This particular title came to me while flying to the country of Ghana from South Africa, and I was passing over what looked like many lakes below the plain. And as I was passing over there, this concept of 2 realms, worlds apart became the title for a book that I must write. And so tonight begins that accountability process to really get started on putting together this book. And I'm sure that, you know, when I was listening to Miles Monroe one year, he looked straight at me as I am looking at you this evening, and he said, "You have a book inside of you." And I just wonder, as I'm sharing this evening, whether you don't perhaps have an unwritten book, a message that the world needs to hear. You know, when you begin to write, you withdraw wisdom that is within you that you never knew you had. So stop just thinking, begin to write. It begins to pull things out of you that excite you and inspire others. So tonight I'm talking about 2 worlds, and of course a world is a system. So we talk about the business world, we talk about the world of education, the world of health, the world of sport, and so you are familiar with what a world is. And if you've been watching any of the Marvel movies, then maybe you also know what a realm refers to. And of course, we're not talking about the Marvel movies tonight and the 9 realms and all of those interesting concepts that were brought out in the days of comics. But you know, what I've realized is that there is certainly an original world and a counterfeit one. And I believe that you and I are living in a counterfeit world, or should I say, we're living in the original world, but we're operating according to the counterfeit world. And I want to share some ideas with you this evening, just some thoughts to get you in a place where you begin to maybe think about a life from a different perspective. You see, in the original world, I believe that you were born to transform this world, not to conform to it. You know, I'm an engineer, and the one thing about being an engineer, or should I say, I used to be a civil engineer, I'm now a life engineer. When I was a civil engineer and I walked into an environment, I would immediately see all the things that did not conform with the principles of engineering, and I would immediately want to begin to change those things so that they would conform to the world that I came from. And so, using that analogy, I believe that you and I, when we are in this world of chaos, perhaps, we look and we see things that aren't working or that aren't functioning correctly, and our natural instinct is to transform those things and to bring them into order. So I believe that you were born to transform, but you learn to conform. I mean, think about it for a moment. You have the ability to speak absolutely any language on the planet. Not only do you have the ability to speak any language, but you have the ability to create your own language. That's the power within you. But you know what? We all speak our mother's tongue. Why? Because we learned to conform from day one. We eat our mother's food. We wear the clothing that our mother used to put on us. And so we are thoroughly conforming to the way this world functions. If that happens, imagine what our dreams look like in the counterfeit world. The dreams that we have in the counterfeit world comply with what other people expect. But if you're dreaming according to the original world, you come up with original ideas. You bring something new. You create something that never before existed. So there's a big difference between these two worlds. You know, something else that I find interesting is that you were born to make decisions with the heart. But this world teaches you that you need to be logical. And by the way, logic is sometimes the most illogical thing to do. And the logic is you must apply your mind. You must think with your head. I was always fascinated by my grandmother. When I went to go and ask her a really important question, something that I was struggling with, you know, she would sit there and listen and listen and listen. And then her answer would sound like this. You know, my boy, I think you should follow your heart. I used to hate that response. But you know, it seems like the elders in society, the people who have been through this thing called life, have learned something. They've begun to connect with the original design of the way that they should operate. And today we're living in a world where too many people are making decisions with their head. Your head is for method. Your heart is to lead. Let's begin to lead with our heart. If we do, the world would be a very different place. You see, we were pre-programmed to function in the original world, but the day we arrive, society wants to reprogram us to function according to the counterfeit world. And so many of the schools that people go through today, even here in our own country, our authorities are wanting to enforce homeschools to run a curriculum according to the one that the government sets. And sadly, the government's curriculum is designed to produce pawns to work for other people's dreams. You and I were never born to be employed. We were born to be deployed. And these two things, those two words, fit into the two worlds that I just talked about. The original world is about deployment. You are sent to do something, whereas the counterfeit world is about employ. By the way, the word ploy is to use something or someone for your advantage. So the relationship between an employer and an employee is naturally one of abuse. Let it be our mission to be deployed. Do you know that every child asks this question, why, over and over and over again, until they go to school. When they arrive at school, or rather when they come out of the schooling system, the main question in their mind is how. I mean, I don't know. I've shared dreams and visions and ideas with countless people over the years. And, you know, they listen. You can see there's an excitement that begins to build up within. And the first words that come out of their mouth are, but how? And, you know, when you utter the words, but how, you have sown the seeds of doubt, which is the cancer for faith. And of course, faith is a part of the original world. This world that we live in interprets faith as risk. Janine and I were talking about that this morning. You know, some people who take a step of faith are often referred to by others, or other people say, wow, that person's taking a big risk. Then there's those people who don't want to take a big risk, they take a calculated risk. I want to tell you, I don't want to take any risk at all. I want to step in faith, knowing full well that the provision for the need that I'm going to have in the future is going to be there, present, waiting for me. So let's stop operating in this world of fear. I think in the last 30 months, I believe, almost 30 months or so, that people have been in a state of being reminded to stay safe every single day, almost every moment of the day. So people naturally, after 2.5 years, are living in a state of fear. It's time to change it. It's time for us to begin to step out in faith. We live in a world that ignores the power of sowing and reaping because they believe in buying and selling. You might say, well, that's the same thing. No, it's not. Sowing is to give away and then to receive something in return. Buying and selling is to first get and then to give. They are opposites. And I can tell you, sowing and reaping has a far, far superior return than buying and selling. I just have to watch the tree outside my window and how every year it produces more seed and more seed and more seed and more seed, thousands and thousands and thousand times what was originally planted. There are so many things that I'd love to share with you this evening. One that is, I think, so important, and Dr. Yona, one of our members that's busy, or partners that's listening in from Tanzania this evening, you know, he said words are for creating, but the world uses words for communicating. And so, but when I look at the abilities that we have, we also have in the original world, we have come to create. But you know, the world has taught us it's not about creating, it's about consuming. And we become consumers to such an extent that we're destroying the very world that we've been given. There's a few key things or key points that I want to draw to your attention. And it relates to these two worlds. In the one world, you need to die and then you live. In the other one, you live and then you die. I mean, this doesn't make sense until you think about a seed. When you think about a seed, for it to become a forest that vegetates the planet, it is mandatory that the seed gives up itself so that the tree can be revealed. This is something that we see every single day around us. It's happening in nature. But we're so busy looking at the concrete jungle and the world system that we're missing a key secret to stepping into the original world. It's about dying to self, and then life really begins. Another concept is being last or first. You know, from day one at school, the only position that mattered, according to my parents, according to the teachers, according to every parent at the school, was to come first. Whether it was on the sports field, in the math class, in the science class, in the English class, first was the only position that mattered. And so we strive to be the winners. But when you look at the captain of a ship, when you look at somebody who has that level of responsibility, he is the top authority on the ship. Yet, when that ship is in distress, as the top authority, his responsibility is to make sure that everyone else is safe before he disembarks. So in that context, being last is a sign of absolute power. And so I want to encourage you to think about these things. You know, in this world, we want to get, and from our getting, we give a little. But in the original world, it was all about give in order to get. If you want to be encouraged, if you're feeling depressed right now, which I'm sure many people are, the answer is to go out and encourage somebody. Give away what you don't have. You know, give other people encouragement. And when you encourage them, guess what happens? You get encouragement back in bucket loads. This is a giving concept. So to end tonight's session, before the panel comes on board, I believe that the world that we live in is all about moving from survival to stability to success. And success is represented by a bag full of money, a title, a trophy, or something that elevates you above others. That's this world system. If you understand this world system, that's the objective. Trample on everyone else, rise to the top, and hopefully you will make it. But if we look at the original world, it's about going underground. It's about dying to self, surrendering to God's plan for your life, and that leads to significance. And significance is represented by the seed, which becomes the tree, which produces fruit, which becomes more seed and more trees, and ultimately a forest that vegetates the planet over and over and over again. I hope that the seed that I've sown this evening, the seed that I've shared with you, this concept of two realms, worlds apart, is going to put you on a journey of discovery, that you can begin to reconnect with the original way that you were designed to operate and function effectively, because you and I can. And I would love to hear some of your comments as you share your message with us this evening. I see there's a number of people who've commented on YouTube or Facebook, and we'll certainly take a look at those posts in a moment. But it's been wonderful chatting to you. I'm looking forward to listening to the panel after the session. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful evening. See you next week, Wednesday, same time, same place.
Wow, thank you, Glen. Thank you so much for that inspiring talk. I've listened to this talk from Glen in different formats, in different places, for at least, I would think, about a half a dozen times. And every time I listen to it, I pick up something new, something fresh. Another seed is planted, as Glen suggested. So, Glen, thank you so much for this inspiring talk. I really look forward to sharing some thoughts with the panel. Look forward to the comments from the audience, and please, ask questions. Audience, participate. This is all about a discussion. It's all about seeds and us nurturing and helping those seeds that have been planted in us through talks like this to grow. Okay, so thank you very much. It's now time for me to introduce my panel, and we can get going on then the discussions. And on my panel today, I have Heather. Heather's based in London. She's a mapper. I know also very keen about understanding the two realms. Heather, welcome. Great to have you on the panel.
Thank you.
Janine, my colleague from Johannesburg, also a ardent mapper, and really looking forward to sharing with you guys. Glen mentioned something about a book within us, and he says, we all have a book in us. Do you mind just sharing if you have a book in you, and what are you doing about that? The book in you, Heather, can we start with you?
I most definitely have a book in me. In fact, to be honest, I think I've got more than one.
Okay.
The problem is, Terence, is I've got lots and lots of slips of paper sitting in various bags, which I need to sit and put together.
Okay.
So, yeah.
So it's a matter of starting, right? Getting going.
Absolutely.
It's a challenge. Janine, thoughts on the book inside of you?
I actually have two books that I know are inside of me.
Great.
I recently watched a show on how to start writing a book, and I have started one of my books.
Okay.
So the chap actually gave some really good advice. He said what you need to do is you need to write down 7 chapter titles and schedule time every week and literally start filling in those chapters. And it's amazing if you give yourself a framework. So my first book has 11 chapters. And once you've got the framework, it's actually quite easy to fill in the holes. So the second book might take a bit longer, but the first book is on its way.
Excellent. Yeah, well done. I guess as Glen said, what he's doing by delivering these talks, he's putting a framework, right, to his book, and that will not only motivate him to actually get to write it, but it will also put some structure around it. Excellent. Okay, so these two worlds that Glen spoke about, the real and the counterfeit world. One of the first concepts he mentioned was we are born to transform and not to conform, right? The question that I have, though, is we default mainly to conforming, right? Why is that? Why do you think we as humans default to conform?
Because that's what we taught, Terence, as a child. If you're one child, if you're the only child, it's so easy to transform because your parents don't have any guidelines, rules, and also if you're the first child in the family, you can transform. You can make the bar as high as you want it to go. But then when there's more of you as siblings, you've got to conform because if you don't, there's repercussions. So you trained in conformity. You get to school, you've got to conform. You've got to wear a uniform. If you don't, you're going to get disciplined. So you kind of like start tying up the discipline and the restrictions with conformity and decide in your mind that I have to conform or else.
Right. So we trained. It's part of how we brought up. We're disciplined if we don't conform. Janine, your thoughts on why we default to conformance?
I think it's because it's where the comfort zone is. You know,
Okay.
that place where nothing grows. It is a lot more uncomfortable to challenge the norm. It's uncomfortable to make people think differently. It's uncomfortable. I was just thinking about, Glen speaks later about clothing. You know, if we had to dress as our heart's desire,
Right.
can you imagine how interesting it would be walking down the street every day? But
Absolutely.
people that challenge the norm are looked at strangely. I'm thinking goths and the odd people that have unusual dress styles. But we
Right.
conform, we comfort zone, and it's easy. It's simple to remain conformant to society. Little is required of us because
Right.
transformation actually requires you to think and step
Right.
out of the
The comfort
space.
zone. Yeah. It's akin to swimming upstream, is it not, Janine?
Definitely.
It's easy to swim downstream. You get the current to take you down, but swimming upstream requires effort. I like that. Just on that, actually, I was thinking, the president of the Ukraine, isn't he such a refreshing guy? I saw him the other day. He had a meeting with the heads of I think the European nations, and there he was dressed in his t-shirt and his army-like pants, and there these guys with ties and all stiff and starchy Western world. That is swimming upstream, not so? I mean, he's making a statement, really. And I looked at it and I thought, wow, love it. I really do, because yes, somebody that doesn't believe his worth is in a suit, an Armani suit or whatever the makes are, a suit and a tie. He is who he is, and he'll get out of his comfort zone by dressing differently. I simply loved it, and I think it's an excellent example. Thanks for raising the swimming upstream component. Okay, and then the heart versus the head. That's an interesting one. Again, most decisions that we make, all right, and I'm putting it out there to the panel, I believe most decisions that we make originally set off something in the heart, right? But again, Janine, it might be those pressures that lead us to it doesn't make sense, right? It's just not logical. And then we normally would go with what our head tells us to. How do we change that? How do we make more heart decisions, and how do we become more led by our heart rather than by our head? I don't have the answer, and I'm sure the audience out there would love to hear our thoughts on that. Janine,
I think the heart is about the things that we love, the things that are precious to us. And I think if we make decisions and choices from the place of love and that which is precious and that which is beautiful and not just pure logic, I think the outcome will be very different. Look, I'm a lover of logic. Hey, I studied finance, so but in the work I do a lot of hard work. I work with people and placing young people in positions, and I can tell you that the hard decisions definitely have greater outcomes. Those things that are based on what is precious, what is beautiful, what is lovely.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Janine. So you say the heart's decisions have better outcomes because that's what we were designed for, right? And our heart leads us to what we were designed for. Our heads lead us elsewhere. Okay. Any thoughts? By the way, Heather's also from a finance background, audit,
Oh, well,
so also a logical thinker. But what are your thoughts, Heather, on?
I think again, with our training and our upbringing, we have forgotten to use our hearts, and I think you've got to retrain yourself. You've got to become more aware of what your heart's actually telling you, because sometimes you make a decision with your head because that's all that's coming through at the very point you need to make a decision. So sometimes you got to not rush the decision, take a step back, and just think for a bit.
Right,
Because you've made head decisions for so long, the heart doesn't automatically kick in. So you got to train yourself to be more aware, train yourself to
right,
focus on one or two things at a time, and then
right.
use your intuition. Because sometimes people don't even know what the intuition is telling them anymore. So it's just retraining yourself, calming down, and getting back to used to listening to your gut feel.
Okay, love that. Listen to your gut. Hear what it says. I also think as well is that the more decisions you make with your heart, and the more they turn out successful, it's a reinforcing trend. It's like a habit. So the more you do it, the more natural it becomes, the more successful and significant you become, and so it goes on. I just want to take a comment from Dr. Yona here. He says buying and selling thrives on the system of supply and demand. The original system, all the needs and demands are known and attended to, right? And then he says this, I will put it this way: abundant supply exists before a need. Okay. So Glen spoke about that as well, and he spoke about provision being there before we even start off. And yet the world will say you've got to work first, then you get the provision. So I'll do my month's job and then I'll get paid. Okay. I won't do what my heart is telling me. And by the way, I'll also get paid. What are your thoughts on the fact that we have in us already what we need to achieve our goals that are aligned with our purpose, right? That's another concept that's very difficult to grasp. Janine, do you want to just share some thoughts on the power that we have within us and the provision that we have within us?
yes, there is. There is actually more in each of us than we realize. And when we conform to the world, we literally suppress that which is unusual in us, or different, or that doesn't conform to the box that you've been put in. I found when I stepped out of the box and started my own thing, I've discovered things in myself that I never imagined possible. And if we speak of provision, I'm going off the topic a little bit, but if
No,
we
that's
speak
fine.
of provision, there's sufficient food to feed the whole world fully. It's just to distribute it correctly. There's food in the world that rots. There's enough for everyone. So it's kind of scary.
Yeah. No, absolutely, and again, it's this conform and transform, and it links into the other concept as well of getting before we give, right? And it's quite clear in Bible terms, it's better to give than to receive. But when you give, the wonder of giving is you receive. You receive not necessarily in the way you thought you'd receive, but you receive in a way that actually enriches your life. I want to move on to the faith and fear aspect. And I know on this particular platform as well, we've had talks around fear and faith, and what it is, or what is it that puts this fear in us. and Janine, you've probably touched on it as well around this. It's a comfort zone, so we fear to step out of the box, right? And I just believe as a community as well, this particular community that we're building right now in Map for Life is such a wonderful community to be able to encourage each other to step out of the box and to look at others and see what they've done and say, well, you know what? I've seen Heather do that. I've seen her step out of the box. It's about time that I do it. So we challenge each other to do that. Just what practical ways can you think of saying, you know what, I'm gonna do something and I'm gonna challenge the rest of the people in my map club to do the same. Heather, I know you run a map club, so do you wanna give us some ideas of how you challenge your team to step out of the box?
I try and encourage them to do what feels right, but I also don't encourage them to forsake all responsibility, because sometimes when you're following your heart, who's funding that? And you got to look at the basics. Who is funding you following your heart? And this is where the logic comes in, you see, because you can be driven by your heart and you can step out in faith, and there's 100,000 other people sitting there and they fearful because of what you're doing. So it's also recognizing that each person needs to answer for himself or herself. Um,
Right,
and
right.
I challenge people just to think like, if you're afraid, what exactly are you afraid of? Because sometimes when you write it down and you see it in front of you on a piece of paper, they start looking quite ridiculous. And
Okay.
usually we're afraid of things that haven't happened. So I do challenge them first to analyze it. Again, using logic.
Yeah. So you are suggesting don't irrationally go with your heart. If that's what I'm hearing. Is saying, at times you've got to bring your head part of your thinking head, your thinking you, into the picture to make a decision. But it's really being led by the heart in most cases. So led by the heart,
Absolutely.
supported by the head.
Yeah, I
Right?
want to travel the whole world. I can't just pack up and start leaving. And I've got 4 kids. I haven't planned their schooling. I haven't looked at the logical side of it, the practical side of it. I'm
Right.
following my heart. We want to travel the world. Let's go. Something like that, just putting it into
Okay.
perspective.
No, absolutely. So what the advice I would give to somebody who says, I want to travel the world, I'm not sure how to do it, I'll say, well, join Map for Life, get
Yep.
yourself a blueprint, set a
Absolutely.
couple of goals and go after them, right? That's some logic in a hard decision, right? Yeah.
Yes, definitely.
Okay, let's move on. We're not going to be able to cover them all, but let's talk about the sowing and the reaping one, right? And I'm not gonna ask any specific question on sowing and reaping. Your thoughts on sowing and reaping. It's a pretty broad topic. Heather, shall we start with you?
I think we sow every day, every moment. Sometimes we don't sow good seed, sometimes we sow bad seed, but whatever seed we are sowing, we will always reap. You don't have to wait for the reaping, it will happen naturally. But we must sow. And even if you think you're not sowing, you're sowing something, because there's always somebody watching you. There's always somebody benefiting from what you're doing. And when you sow intentionally, oh, the rewards are just fantastic, because you feel good in your heart because you're
Right,
giving.
right, right, right. Thanks, Heather. I mean, like any farmer would know, if you sow bad seed, you get a bad crop. There's no doubt about it. So good seed, you'll get. So I like that idea of understanding that you're sowing at all times. As we speak here, as a panel, the 3 of us, we are sowing, right? When Glen addressed us, he was sowing. Janine, your thoughts on sowing and reaping?
Sowing and reaping is a very powerful concept. And I agree with Heather, what you put in the ground is definitely likely to come up. And the thing is, things that we've put in the ground in the past are inclined to come up in unruly times. However, just start focusing on giving what you have. And whether that be, a lot of people see sowing as money. But if you're sowing encouragement and you sowing just good conversation, doing things like what we're doing now, it does come up. And I can testify in my life. It's amazing. I can, in all respects, sow what you have and what you can. And sometimes you don't realize what you're putting out there, what actually is happening for the other person. And the fruit that they pick, it's a gift in itself, just hearing people's stories. When they come back and they tell you, like you said this to me the other day, and this is what has been the outcome. And you're like, wow, I never imagined that was possible. But, just that put whatever you have down, it will come up beautifully.
Thanks, Jenny. Thanks. It's a lot has got to do with how authentic one is as well. I love that what you both said about just putting yourself out there, making sure we sow good seed, and being patient. I must admit, in my life, I've often been impatient. I thought, well, I've sowed something. I expect a return. And yet the seed was busy germinating and doing whatever it needed to do in the ground before I saw it blossom, grow. And I think some good advice for us all actually is let's have that patience and just have that faith and knowledge that whatever we sow, we will reap at some point in the future. I think this is a good point to sort of bring the discussion to a close when it comes to sowing of seeds. And I think what we've all done today is encourage each other, and hopefully we've encouraged the audience as well to go out there and live not as the world would have us live, but live in a way that we were purposed to live and created to live. It's and we got to be intentional, really intentional about it. And I believe, sessions such as this and other sessions where like-minded people get together, and I speak in particular of the MAP Club concept, where like-minded people can sow into each other's lives and into others' lives as well, that at the end of the day the world becomes a better place. Because if we look at where we're at currently with world affairs, we're not globally in a very good place. That does not detract, though, from us still encouraging and seeking out a good place. I really want to thank the panel for your comments. Again, I want to thank Glen for his talk. I think it's a wonderful talk. And again, I want to lay down the challenge to anybody out there. Keep on planting seeds. You do have a book in you, and I believe everybody has a book in them, begin writing that book, right? You've got some excellent advice from the panel and from Glen of how to begin writing a book. Write the book in your life. Don't leave it till it's too late. Continue planting seeds. Bless the world out there, and all the best. Thank you for listening, and have a good day further. Good night, good evening, good morning, wherever you are in the world. Thank you.
Thank you.